Good morning, everyone. The Digital Center of Excellence welcomes you to from digital to in real life, setting key performance indicators to reflect your organization. Thank you all for participating. Today's presenter is Amanda Desayas, Lead Content Strategist at Digital Services and Solutions. Please meet the team members who collaborated to make this webinar possible. Will Alfer, Director of Content, Yen Tang, Director of Outreach, and Judith Martinez-Adri, the Digital Content Strategist, and today I'll be your host. Before we get started, I'd like to share with you information about the Digital Center of Excellence. Our mission is to improve the state's presence and citizen experience on all state-supported digital platforms. Through a statewide community of private and public sector professionals, the DCOE oversees digital standards and guidelines and promotes growth and maturity across the state's digital landscape. Our members are representatives of agencies like the Georgia Department of Human Services, the Georgia Department of Public Health, Department of Revenue, Georgia Department of Driver Services, and Georgia Student Finance Commission, just to name a few. And next, I will go through some housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded. You will receive an email with a link to the recording. And please enter your questions in the chat box, and we will answer them in the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. And finally, at the end of the webinar, you will also see a QR code. Please scan it and tell us how we did in the satisfaction survey. And now, let's welcome today's presenter, Amanda Desayas, Lead Content Strategist at Digital Services and Solutions. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you, Judith. Welcome, everybody. As Judith said, my name is Amanda Desayas. I am Lead Content Strategist on the DSGA team at GTA. I'm going to be taking you through our discussion today. This is a brief look at what we'll cover. We'll talk about what you need before you start, the process you can use to develop goals, and then turn those into measurable KPIs, how you can track those KPIs, including more advanced options, and how you can get started at your agency. We talk to agencies and consult on strategy pretty much every day. And when it comes to KPIs, these are a lot of the things that we hear. So maybe time and agency demands got in the way, or maybe there wasn't buy-in, but they're currently maybe not tracking metrics, or they're making a good attempt to attract, but they're picking metrics that might not be right, or they're not really sure where to start, or they're taking a deeper dive into their analytics, but they haven't connected those analytics to the organizational goals and what users are trying to achieve. So wherever you might fall here, we want you to end today with some useful takeaways that you can actually act on. With that in mind, we want to encourage participation and make this as interactive as possible. Hopefully you brought at least one of your organizational goals like we suggested. You can use that as an example to work on throughout our discussion. At the end, we'll ask you more about your goals and challenges, and you'll have the chance to ask us some questions. As Judith said, you can drop your comments in the chat. But we're hoping by the end, you'll have at least one actionable goal and with a corresponding KPI and a plan for tracking it. But before we get started, we want to set you up for success. So here's what you need to think about. Have you laid your foundation? Meaning, do you have a detailed content plan in place? You're not going to be able to achieve your goals if you haven't thought about important aspects of your content plan, like what does your information architecture look like? Have you defined your key user journeys? Have you worked on the wayfinding for the website? Have you organized information in your taxonomy? So first ask yourself, have you answered these questions? So what does your content model look like? Have you decided on an information architecture that works for you? Who are your users? What do they want to achieve? What do you want to achieve? How will the users find the solution? What do you want to happen next after that? And what is the optimal solution for those user tasks? So this is always our starting point when we work with agencies. These are the fundamental questions that we want to answer first. You're not going to meet your goals if you haven't addressed these issues, and your analytics are going to be a mess. So you got to build the car before you can go on the road trip. So if right now you're thinking, ooh, yikes, I don't think we've addressed all of this, here's some ways that you can get started. You can schedule some working sessions with team members at various levels to get in-depth answers to those questions. You can maybe start with a content inventory to get a sense of what you have now, what you can get rid of, and how to best organize the content that you end up with. And then test what you come up with. You can do that through any combination of things like user surveys, focus groups, user experience testing, analytics, whatever you have the capability to do. And of course, you can always contact us. Our team can work with you to do everything that we've mentioned. So assuming you've addressed your content model, let's look at the process of how we turn goals into metrics. We're frequently asked, what metrics should I be looking at? That's a pretty popular question that we get. And it's annoying, but the answer usually is, it depends. And it's true. Public sector metrics are very different than private sector. What each agency needs to track will differ depending on their services, their audience, their staff, their capabilities, their needs, all of that. So that's why we want to focus today on the process that you can use to figure out what KPIs are important to you. This is the same process that we use when we work with agencies. Start big. So what are your organizational goals? And these are one of the things that we sort of asked you to think about and bring today. So here are a few agency examples that we've encountered. I like some of these because they talk about the agency's mission, but it's something that connects directly to what they're tracking. This is for Georgia Pathways, an organization that works with Georgia schools. They provide screening and resources for deaf and hard of hearing children in Georgia. And right here, we see what they do, and we get a hint of the goals they'll be measuring against. This is Office of the Commissioner of Insurance and Safety Fire, or OCI. They offer a lot of services. They cover a lot. So, but if you look on their website, some of the key services they highlight are right in this mission statement. So that's insurance information, certifying insurance agents, and safety inspections for buildings. And then we have the Department of Administrative Services, and they focus on the services that to provide largely to state agencies and organizations. And this is what most of their services focus on. Then who are your users? So we're so focused on, we're oftentimes like at agencies, we're so focused on maybe running the agency, it's easy to think about what we want to get out of a site rather than what the user needs to get out of the site. So that's why at DSGA, we're always trying to come back to who is that user and what do they need. Some real examples that we've seen of user groups over the years: property taxpayers, parents of deaf children, insurance agents in Georgia, Georgians who want to start an LLC or register any kind of business, and full-time permanent employees of the state of Georgia. So one thing we do see a lot is that an agency will say, we serve adult Georgians and legislators and industry professionals and regulators, and then they keep going. And by the time they're done, their audience is pretty much everybody. Like they'll say inside Georgia and outside Georgia, and by the end, we're just like, so everyone. But if that sort of sounds like you, maybe try to scale back and get more detail about who it is you're serving. Yes, all of those groups may make up your audience. We totally understand that that's true, but chances are only one or two or even three main groups are coming to your site in very large numbers. So think about the most common reasons people are coming to your site and try to focus on those groups. What are your users trying to accomplish? Again, put yourself in the position of that user. Try to think about what they need to do and navigate your site as if you were them. So some example user goals might be to procure new equipment for a state agency, check on the status of a tax refund, renew a professional certification, find grants for preserving historic properties, and learn what tasks to complete when moving to Georgia. So as you can see from some of these examples, a user is probably trying to complete a task, complete a transaction, but the service you might be offering them could just be information, like in the case of somebody finding out what they need to do when they move to Georgia. So now let's think about the pain points and challenges, what the pain points and challenges are, both for the user and the organization. I've divided some of these examples into internal and external because, again, when we hear about challenges, we're often told the challenges that the agency is facing, and that's important, and we want to address that. But ultimately, the site is for the users. So we want to know what obstacles they're facing. And remember, if a user has a problem, it's going to become your problem eventually when you get a call or an email, or your system is overrun, or you're just failing to meet your targets. So some internal examples, and these are things that we've run into with agencies, just generally too much stress on agency resources, whether that's time, technology, personnel. People can't find what they're looking for. They're calling, they're emailing, they're getting the wrong people. They have to be passed around. So that's a pretty common thing, and we want to take that burden off of agencies. Inconsistent content standards. We do have large agencies where the issue is like they could have 50 plus content contributors and subject matter experts, and trying to get everybody on the same page and think about user journeys across all those different maybe departments or practices, thinking about having a uniform information architecture, content standards, voice, the way everything's formatted, that can really be a challenge. Externally, it could be users not easily navigating the site to find the information they need, not being able to complete their intended task and maybe giving up or calling, or just not being able to get in touch with the right contact. So taking this all into account, we can start to craft more thoughtful goals. So we talk a lot about SMART goals, and these ensure that you have more detailed and measurable goals. SMART goals are much easier to create KPIs for, and we start out with wanting it to be specific. We don't want general goals like improve user experience. Like, we want you to improve your user experience, but that's not a good goal. Because what does that really mean? What are you trying to accomplish specifically? Who are you targeting? How would you measure that? We want it to be obviously measurable. You want to attach real numbers to your goal so you can actually track it. We want it to be achievable. Certainly, you want your goals to push you, but also be realistic. And this is where we remind people, think about what factors you can actually control. So, like, for example, when we talk about DHH pathways for deaf and hard of hearing children, they obviously don't know how many children will be born with hearing loss in a given year, but they can track how quickly they're able to respond for requests for resources on their old site versus their new site. We want goals to be relevant. So sometimes we'll see all these KPIs an agency is tracking. And when we dig into why they're tracking so many different things, it's often not tied to organizational goals. Rather, maybe it was some initiative or attempt to have more quantifiable results to show leadership. And in those cases, 3 or 4 or 5 in really impactful, relevant numbers are more persuasive and useful to you than a dozen metrics that don't tell you much about your specific performance. And finally, we do want it to be time bound. We typically favor annual goals for the nature of what agencies do, with check-ins about once a quarter, but it's really going to depend on what's right for your agency. So now that we have SMART goals, we can start developing KPIs for them. And the process basically drills down like this. You have your organizational goal, that's the big picture. You have your KPI, which is that measurable data point that relates to the big picture. We're thinking about what triggers that. What is the action to track that metric? And then what is your target? What is that specific time-based goal for that metric that you're shooting for? Here's an example. So sometimes you'll see goals and it'll just be this top line, increase public engagement. But what does that mean? How is that going to be done? How will we measure that? Well, we can track that through program enrollments, maybe newsletter signups. Each submission can then be measured, and we can do that by tracking visits to the completion page. And then think about, okay, what would we shoot for? What's realistic? So how about a 10% enrollment increase in a year and a 5% increase in MailChimp emails in 3 months? We've taken what was a very general goal in the beginning and made it specific and trackable. So some example KPIs can be increased conversions by 10% within 12 months of a new site launch, reduce phone calls to an agency's customer service department by 25% over Q1 and Q2 of the previous year, or decrease response time for educational service requests by 10% in the first year from program launch. And these are all KPIs that are related to overall organizational goals, and they can be measured over a specific period of time. And this is a really important takeaway that we want you to always think about is it's important to remember that 1 or 2 metrics in isolation mean nothing. So don't get caught up on a particular number. It's like the example if you've ever had maybe a test or blood done at a doctor's office, the doctor's going to say to you, well, one number on there doesn't really, even if that number is bad, it doesn't really tell you much. They want to look at all of your lab results and maybe some other testing and your exam and all of those things, because all of that together in context gives them the full picture and they can make a determination. And analytics are really not that different from that principle. So you need to look at several metrics in combination to get that context. So for example, if you are tracking bounce rate as a measure of content relevance, you're not really getting enough information in that instance. So why? To what end are you tracking this? What specifically are you trying to learn from that metric? What are you considering a bounce? Because in different analytics programs, they have different definitions, and sometimes you can even set those parameters yourself. What is the call to action on that page? Have you looked at it? Have you looked at it from the perspective of your user? Are there several calls to action that are all competing with each other? What is telling you about the quality and the amount of the content? Have you considered user intent? Have you factored in where this is along the user's journey? So that bounce rate isn't answering important questions and could actually be a deceptive metric, so it doesn't make a strong KPI. And you also want to avoid what we refer to as vanity metrics. They're typically superficial metrics that maybe sound really impressive and impactful, but don't provide much insight. Some of these can be things like sessions, page views, time on site, time on page, unique visits. One example that we ran across was back in 2020, when COVID was first happening and everything was locked down. We run Georgia Gov. So on Georgia Gov, we had seen a huge increase in people on social media contacting us, people coming to our website, and so did Department of Labor, because all these people were trying to find out about unemployment insurance. They had questions, they didn't know who to get in touch with, they couldn't finish the application. So that when you look at that on the surface, you say like, oh, well, there's so much traffic, there's so much engagement, but that's a deceptive success metrics, because that's not really successful. Not only does it indicate that something really bad was going on, it also showed us that like people were not getting the information they needed, or they weren't getting in touch with who they needed to get in touch with. Mailboxes were full, so there became a huge problem. So A lot of the analytics conversation also can focus on the private sector, but many private sector metrics don't really translate well into the public sector. And I'm not saying that these metrics aren't important, but we want to encourage you to delve deeper into your analytics. So think about the entire user experience across the whole journey and get more context. In order to dive deeper, I'd like to go into some capabilities in SiteImprove that you can use to gain more insight and track your SMART goals. If you're not in GovHub and you don't have access to SiteImprove, you can find most of these functionalities in Google Analytics, which does have a free version. Starting off, an important number that we talk about a lot, and one goal you can set for yourself right off the top is your DCI score. So I'm sure most of you know, but the DCI score is the average of your scores for quality assurance, accessibility, and SEO. It's on a scale of 1 to 100, and all agencies should be at least at that 80 benchmark. This will give you a sense of how functional, findable, and user-friendly your content is. And again, this is an easy KPI that you can start off with. Once you have your custom KPIs that you develop, you can actually program them into SiteImprove to track. You can input up to 100, but try to be really limited and strategic in how you use them. And the great thing about this is it allows you to set goals, choose key metrics to measure, monitor progress, assign responsibility on your team for that KPI, and you can also decide what action you can take if those goals are not being met. Key metrics allow you to connect metrics to your KPIs, and you can add triggers and track conversions. Events are user interactions on your website that don't necessarily load a new page. So an example might be playing an embedded video, click on a link that reveals information without reloading the page. This can just be helpful when you have KPIs that aren't linked directly to page loads. User journeys show the different paths that visitors take between a start page, point A, and an end page, point B. And user journeys can help you understand your visitors' navigation behaviors. You can identify where your information architecture maybe needs to be improved. And you can visualize how many different ways there are to reach an intended destination on your website. Sort of along a similar line, we have funnels. So with funnels, you can analyze how visitors follow key steps on your website. When creating a funnel, you choose the specific points in the user journey that you want to analyze. And one example of a funnel can be used to analyze a website campaign from landing page to the conversion point. And when you define a funnel, you can use the final step of a funnel as the success criteria in the key metrics. So for example, the thank you page when somebody's registered. And if you're tracking these user journeys and creating funnels and you are finding that there's a drop off, you can use behavior tracking to drill down on a particular page. And remember to look at this information, but then look at all of the content on that page as a user would. So is there too much content before the call to action? Are there calls to action that are competing with one another? Where is the information layer in the process? And have you prioritized content on the page appropriately? Behavior maps can also be helpful as you analyze your content. Behavior maps give a visual overlay showing where visitors click, scroll, and interact on a specific page on your website. This is another feature that can be used in combination with funnels to help determine maybe why there was a high drop-off rate at a particular step on a user's path. I said we wanted you to have some actionable takeaways today, so let's talk about how you can actually apply what's been discussed. So first off, I'm going to kick it off. We want to hear from you. What are some of your organizational goals? Do you have SMART goals? Have you thought about how you can translate that into a KPI? What will you measure for that in Site Improve? So just kicking it off, does anybody want to share maybe an organizational goal that you've brought? Do we have anything in the chat? Judith, are they able to only put the questions in the chat? Would somebody be able to read those?
I don't see any in the chat yet.
Okay. So does somebody want to share maybe goals that they're tracking now, or what some of their KPIs are? I mean, if you want, we can also, if you want to follow up, we can also talk about those, but this is kind of our chance to maybe talk this out.
Oh, Amanda, there's a question from DOR. It says, we track referrals to our site from one of our third-party applications. Would this indicate that users are having problems using the app?
So the referrals are from so the referrals are coming from where?
Yeah, let me repeat it. It says, we track referrals to our site from one of our third-party applications. Would this indicate that users are having problems using the app?
So I think this is one of those situations where you would definitely need more context. I think one of the big things we have is, where is the information layer? Because I think we see sometimes people start introducing information as people have already gone down that funnel, they've already gone down that process, and then they see a lot of drop off. I think one thing you'd probably want to do is start seeing, like, where specifically, what page, where in the process are they coming from? Maybe look at that page, look at that step. This might be somewhere where tracking events could be helpful, especially if, I know the issue is some third-party applications on websites, they don't trigger a page load. So that can be difficult. That's kind of a black hole for some agencies if the third-party application doesn't offer their own analytics. But this is definitely a thing where, let's start looking at the page in context. Maybe you can use a behavior map, maybe do some behavior tracking, look at the entire user journey, see where people are, look at some of your user paths, see where people are maybe dropping off. I think that may be a better indicator of, are you losing people? Is this relevant? And maybe the KPI that goes with that is completion rate, because if you are seeing that completion rate is an issue, maybe make that goal an improvement in completion rate, and then start to really dig into, hey, where are we losing people?
Thank you, Amanda. Does anybody else have another question? Please include it in the chat box, and we'll be glad to answer them.
Hey, Amanda, I'll throw out one that DOAS sent me. When they talk about organizational goals, they wrote, the primary goal of our website is to provide an engaging and informative space where customers and visitors can easily learn about our services and what we can do for them, allow visitors to browse information based on their own choice, and find what they need to complete a task or transaction, and provide a framework to enhance our reach.
So I think that's great. I think those are all things we want your website to be doing. I think that maybe breaking those down into more digestible things that they can address. It sounds like self-service is really a big thing that they're focusing on from that statement. So starting to think about maybe some KPIs around that are How can we have more successful completions of some key tasks? Maybe bring out like 3 key tasks in the first year or 6 months that you want to improve completion rates on. Maybe one indicator is, are you getting fewer calls and emails of people kind of being lost and not knowing what to do? So start thinking about, I think those are all really, that's a great starting point, and those are good goals. But also I know that they've just recently redone their website, and it's great that they want to do all those things, but sometimes like try to take like 3 things that you want to work on this year and then start to build out from there. Because I think that's a lot, especially for a new website and especially for an agency like DOS that does so many different things. So just
Amanda,
moving on.
sorry, I was
If we
just
want to
gonna
go to
jump in.
general questions, we can just open up for general questions.
Well, Sarah mentioned in the chat, one of the things you just mentioned was about the funnel and maybe seeing where people drop off along the way. So GTA has this application, the Rover application, and I think you're familiar with that. Maybe you can talk more about it after I finish. But there was a certain point in that application where it seemed like people were dropping off, and as it turns out, it was it was further into the application than we might have thought. But we realized that was where everything was like, you must have a driver's license, you must have been born in Georgia, you must have a credit card, or whatever it is, all the things that were. And so people were like, oh, okay. And then they were leaving, and it was like, why are they leaving? So just to your point, about where people drop off can be very enlightening.
Yeah, that was one. And that's one of those deceptive metrics, because I remember we were asked about it and that we were looking at this one point and it was like, oh, there's 75% drop off. What's going on? And then we look and we see, like you said, there's that, okay, this is the information layer where it says, okay, this is the application where you can do this, this, and this. These are the people it's for, and here's what you'll need to proceed. So from there, that's where all the users that we actually need are moving on. So that's actually good. Like we want it, in a sense, you kind of want drop off because you want it to be relevant to the people who are looking to complete that task. We just want that information layer to happen sooner. So you're not looking at this and saying, oh, we only have a 25% completion rate. This is terrible. It's like, actually, no, the people who need it are getting what they need. It's just that you weren't weeding out the people who didn't need it earlier in the process. And that's also something I see a lot when agencies use third-party applications, because the applications allow for instructions to be included as you go along. And we try to tell agencies, like, on your website, before they even get to that application, try to give them that information up front, because you're probably going to see a lot less drop off and a lot more completions, or a lot fewer people who are starting the application, having to save it, stop, and then come back later. All right, if that's all the questions we have, we can move on. Are we good with questions? All right. So as we wrap up, I want to make sure we have some actionable next steps for you. So just some things that you can get started at your agencies. Work on your content model if you haven't already. You can contact us if you'd like us to facilitate a content strategy workshop for your agency. You can meet as an entire team to align on your organizational goals. And we mean that at every level. So make sure team members attend, so there is leadership buy-in, but also that content contributors are informed and everyone is on the same page. Then translate some of those organizational goals you brought today maybe into SMART goals. Brainstorm some KPIs that you can assign to those goals and that you can track. Set up some of the advanced tracking that we talked about in SiteImprove. SiteImprove has a lot of great tutorials and resources. I definitely encourage people to check that out. But if you have like a very specific question you need help with, you can also open a support ticket. And then make sure you are setting benchmarks and then setting regular intervals to monitor your performance and make adjustments if necessary. So a lot of agencies track monthly, but that's not always going to be enough time for everybody, especially for agencies where users only need to take action annually, like renewing a certification, renewing your business registration, paying taxes, like all of those things are going to happen once a year. So monthly isn't going to be enough time. We usually recommend checking in about once a quarter if you're tracking annual goals.
Amanda, we have a question from Sharon Stanley.
Sure.
It just came a few seconds ago. She said it's a goal under kind of like a long-term infrastructural investments, examine space utilization across county facilities for future workforce and facilities planning.
Okay. So I think that's one of those things where we talk about focusing on what you can actually control when you're making goals, because it sounds like some of that is kind of outside your your control. I would say also think about maybe how this ties back to your website, because that translates into a huge organization. Like that sounds like a big organizational goal, but how is your website getting involved in that process? Like, are people submitting plans? Are there budget targets you're trying to hit? Think about kind of what you want people to do on the website that's like related back to that. And definitely think about what you can control there. And then think about what information on the website is kind of addressing that, and who is that audience that you're talking to or audiences. And think about, like, going back to also thinking about your content model, like how are you organizing some of that information and how are you funneling people through that process.
Perfect. Actually, Sharon Stanley just replied and she said, this has nothing to do with our website.
Oh, okay. I think then, think about how you can take your organizational goals and maybe translate that to something on your website. And if it has nothing to do with your website, then maybe talk to leadership about, like, yes, this is our mission statement, but how does our website address that? Or is this the right place for that? Is this something that are there other channels that we're working on for this? And then maybe I would definitely, it sounds like, I would definitely get everybody together in terms of, leadership and content contributors and who's working on your website, and talk about, okay, what's relevant for our website? What does our website do? Who does our website serve? And how is our website serving our larger goal? So I think that, like, you just kind of start from one and sort of see what the answers to those things are.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay. I don't see any other questions right now. We have a few minutes left, but this concludes our KPIs webinar. Thank you so much, Amanda. This has been amazing, great information. And I love the way you made it very easy to comprehend. I'd like to invite everyone to please take a few minutes or seconds to scan the QR code. We would love to see your feedback. Your opinion is very important to us so we can continue to make these webinars. And we enjoy having you today, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks. Have a great day.
You too.